Since 2020, camps have been more and more aware of their staff's needs, particularly their pay, schedule flexibility, and the amount of burden they carry. But meanwhile, our staff have very similar additional needs as our campers do. And while we're super patient and accommodating with our campers, we often struggle with the balance and concept of accommodating our staff. We discussed this mental block we seem to have with Allison Krabill and Jordanna Grossinger, and it's an excellent conversation that's sure to make you see things a little bit differently. This is the Day Camp Pod.
Welcome back to the Day Camp Podcast. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
And we are joined today by Allison Krabill and Jordanna Grossinger for a very, very interesting topic of how to support our staff that come in with all kinds of additional needs. Initially I thought this was going to be an inclusion podcast. We're going to be talking about kids and all that kind of stuff. And no, this one's going to take a little bit of a turn. And, I don't think that there's so many staff that are being hired with known additional needs so much as ones that sort of just arise or pop up and come to fruition. And we are day camp, and they go home, and they're going to therapists, and they're going to and they're taking medications, like all these kind of things that we may not even be aware of, and then it falls into our lap. But before we get started with that, we have Allison here, and she's been on the pod before. I missed the last one, Allison, but I did listen to it, and it was great. Allison is the you call yourself the executive director, right, of the Summer Camp Society, right? And for all my contemporaries, the old heads of camping, right, who always say, "What is the Summer Camp Society?" I want to give you a forum to sort of explain it, because a lot of your wonderful members and folks, or whatever you want to call your Illuminati committee, they've been a part of our podcast, and we know and love them. But please explain, like, how this was put together and what you guys do.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I think the easiest way to describe it is a professional development network. So bringing people together to have important conversations about camp, not just at conferences or in person, but all the time throughout the year, support each other during summer, talk about things during the off season. And we do that in a variety of ways. So we have membership where we have actual meetings that we're talking about, our own kind of community where we communicate and discuss things. We have blogs, podcasts, resources, anything to just help push camps forward and make camps better, make it easier to work at camp. Because let's be honest, it's just hard. And it's an industry where there's a lot of burnout, and it can feel really lonely. And this is supposed to make that be different and feel different. And to me, it does. It started in 2017. Jack Schott and Sarah Kurtz McKinnon founded it because I just thought there should be some different conversations happening than what they were hearing at the time. And here we are continuing to try to have those big, important conversations wherever and whenever we can. So it's the shortest version I can give you, Eddie.
Yeah, well, it's a support system. I mean, I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good way to frame it. But also, you did mention a couple of things that I want to explain a little bit deeper, which is that, number one, you guys have a great website with a ton of resources on it, which like free resources. It's actually called like free stuff, I think, the section, and it's tremendous. It's a great like clearinghouse of really cool things from really cool people about camp. But secondarily, you do offer a membership. So what does that mean? What does the membership mean?
Yeah, so we do have a ton of free resources, like you said, and we have some resources that are behind paywalls with membership. So we have a fully planned week of staff training and all the sessions that go along with that. We have a neurodiversity packet for helping people support their campers. We have just a ton of premium resources that's included in membership. Members have 2 meetings a week virtually. You can opt in, opt out, attend at the frequency that works for you. We have Kelly Shuna right now is doing our day camp deep dive. So special meeting for day camps once a month. We'll have experts. Yesterday we had someone from an organization called Humanize Us All just come in and talk to us. So people from different industries, different walks of life who help us have conversations about what does this mean at our camp, which I think is cool. And then the really vibrant Slack community where I always tell people you can go post on Facebook, and you're going to get a million answers, and that's great. You're going to get some great answers, you're going to get some good answers, you're going to get some terrible answers. But if you want to start with the same foundation and beliefs, that's the benefit of having a system like this to communicate. We have some virtual courses, for members everything we can do to make their lives easier. Members frequently just call me and we just troubleshoot things. So it's a little built-in consulting as well. And it really, we have about 200 members right now. And it's an awesome community.
Woo! That's awesome. And you have a lot of your top people are also great trainers. So just like, we promote, of course, the Go Camp Pro people like Travis and Beth Allison and all the other folks that are on, that you get lots of emails from Travis if you're part of his email thing. But you guys also have a slew of awesome people. And what I also like is that everybody plays nice with each other. People are at all these different conferences, they're on each other's podcasts. And, as you start getting, swooned by Allison's lovely accent, you can hear more of her accent on her podcast that she does often with Jack and often on her own, the Summer Camp Society podcast, which is terrific, that I subscribe to. So
Yeah, thank
thanks
you so
for
much.
all that.
Thanks. And people can go back and listen to you on our podcast. They can back and
That
listen
is
to
true.
that episode too.
That is true. That is true. All right. And then next up, we have Jordanna. So Jordanna, I think it's awesome that you're here because the first inclusion podcast we ever did was with your mom.
It was, yes.
Yeah. And you are her spitting image, and you do a lot of things that she does and did and all those kind of things. And now you're a full-time camp director up in the Great
Sure
White North.
am. Yes, exactly. Across the border. And so we're really proud of all the work that my mom started, especially in the world of inclusion. And she really set the stage for not only us, but many camps on kind of what that means in a camp setting. And we're really proud of that. And as the years go on, that inclusion program has taken a couple different forms, and we've transformed it a little bit, but we're really proud of the inclusion program we have here at Robin Hood. And my mom's an occupational therapist, and our inclusion program came out of her work with students that she was working with, and just her innate desire to want to include every child and have them experience camp. And that went from campers and extended to staff as well. And it's really a pillar of what we do here. And I'm a speech pathologist in my other life with my other hat. And so inclusion runs deep for us. And so whatever we can do to include people in our community is what we strive for.
Yeah. And, in this world, post-pandemic world where DEIB is just such a big thing and everybody talks about it all the time, I think that people leave out people with additional needs. I think they get the short end of the stick a lot. And when Sam and I do our day camp roundtables at Tri-State and at ACA National, whenever we bring up inclusion, the volume of the room literally goes from down 50%. Because nobody has anything to say, because so few people give it any real thought. They get inclusion kids and, sort of by accident, and they deal with it as well as they can, but they're really not intentional about it. And so we were giving this talk, we were talking about various things, including inclusion at Tri-State. And we started talking about inclusion, and this lady raises her hand from Camp Deanie Reback in North Jersey. And she says, what do you do about staff with additional needs? And to which everybody, including myself, got pretty quiet, because it's, wow, never really thought of it that way. But then the more you think about it, the more you realize that we do deal with it, right? And it may not be in the form of them being in a wheelchair or, being diagnosed as being on the spectrum and things like that. It's depression, it's anxiety, and it's all these other things that are coming to light that we've been dealing with hardcore, but we haven't been super intentional about how we deal with it in our camp. We treat it like just another nuisance sometimes, and that's really not fair to them and to the mission of what we're trying to do, as you eloquently said, Jordanna, because I think it is a pillar of why we all do what we do here at camp. So, Sam, this was your baby. I'm handing it off to you, and we can start it off.
Well, those that do inclusion already know some best practices that they always think of featuring on the kids, but those work for adults as well and for our staff as well. And I think a lot of times we don't even consider that our staff needs some of those things like visual aids, printed schedules, support system, and then setting that environment is going to head off a lot of problems in the long run with our staff as well as kids, because it works for all ages. So, question to both of you, I was just going to ask some of the physical environment things that you do. Um, I know the printed schedules we do for training, but then do we continue to do them on a weekly basis? You know, what visual aids do you use? What do you have fidgets at staff training? I mean, you know, go for it. Give us all your wonderful tools that you
Well,
use.
I want to start with staff training. I think that's really
Yeah,
important because staff training is about the most stressful part
yeah,
of things, right? You're throwing these people into basically like the first day of college orientation, where it is extremely awkward, no matter how great you throw it together. And people have all these crazy feelings, and you see people breaking down. Oh, by the way, we're going to talk about child abuse now, you know? And by the way, we have to all go swimming now. So get your clothes off and get in the pool and things like that. So yeah, I'd like to start with orientation. How can we be better aware and helpful in that situation?
Yeah, I think it's tricky because when you know exactly what someone's needs are, it's almost easier to solve for that problem, right? I think as camp people, we're really good at problem solving. And so when someone says, hey, I am in a wheelchair and I need help with my mobility and I can't reach this high, so can we move everything lower? We can make those physical adjustments. Also, if people are very upfront about their needs, we can be aware of those. And sometimes, and I find that staff are getting even better at advocating for themselves these days. And so they'll be very upfront about what their needs are and what strategies work for them, maybe in school, and how they can be applied at camp. So they kind of help us with that when they're aware. I think the challenge in 2024 is that there's a lot of things that people don't say out loud, whether it's that they assume that we will just accommodate for everything, or that they're just not sure yet because they haven't been in a situation like camp, like staff training, like you're saying, Andy. Like, that's super stressful for anyone, let alone if you have additional needs or a predisposition to some anxiety about certain things or anything along those lines. So I think what we've been working on as a team is this principle of like a universal design for learning, which is like a fancy word that says like what works for one person is going to be helpful for a lot of different people. And so even if you know that it will help one person, to have it available for everyone to access, you're already making such a difference. And that's like one small thing that people can be doing in their staff trainings for staff, but also like on a day-to-day basis for campers. So like Sam's talking about with those visual schedules, having those posted around. How about just increase signage to let people know where things are, right? Eliminate the unknowns as much as you can. And I mean, I'm a proud Summer Camp Society member too. And I think the hidden curriculum like really extends to how we can illuminate those things for our community, whether they have additional needs or not.
Just a couple of things. First of all, Allison, we definitely need the link to that neurodiversity thing that you were talking about, because I think people need those kind of resources big time. Um, so along the lines of what you were saying, Jordanna, I think it's interesting. We are definitely taking a approach because we have, at least 10% of our population is kids with additional needs. So we are not training for like special needs campers. We're training for everybody because it's all the same skills anyway, right? I think what you're saying is that why why aren't the staff part of that too? Right? It's
Totally.
it's
Yeah.
all the same thing. It's all the same thinking. You're 100% right. And that's a big, it's like this awakening that's happening since the pandemic, right? Where everybody's just going, oh my God, everything we do with the staff, we should do the kids, we should do that, right? All these like positive reinforcement things we're doing and, showing gratitude and all these kind of things. Like for whatever reason, we weren't thinking about it with the staff. But the question I have is how do we get this information from the staff, right? Are we going to be diving into their medical history and things like that? Like for kids, we're putting it in on an application. The parents are writing it in and I think more and more parents are very upfront about their kids' situations compared to when I started 25, 30 years ago. You know, what could we give the staff some kind of like red carpet in letting us know these things so we can help support that once they're hired, right? So it's not like you know, this is part of like deciding if you're going to be hired or not. But once you're hired, we want to help you. How can we have to sort of throw that out there to them so we can support them, because otherwise, like you said, they're going to show up at orientation. They're going to get all stressed out. They could have a breakdown or something. And if we knew about it, just like the same with the kids, oh, if we knew about little Johnny, we would have been able to better support him. So that's what I'm thinking right now.
We started doing an emergency form for the staff, just a very short for their director, but it has on there, what medicine are you taking? Because we need to know that. And so if they don't want to disclose their diagnosis, if they put that they're on certain medicine that we know is antidepressant, or we know is ADHD medicine, then we can follow up with a question about, you know, how do you like to learn? What, you know, what things are you going to need with your group to help support you? And like Jordanna said, nowadays, I think it's not such a stigma as it was not very long ago to have a need, to have anxiety. My daughter does, and she will now start with that in some situations just to head off her getting escalated. And so some are getting much better about disclosing. But you can sneak it that way too, having that emergency form for their director, that if they're paying attention, there's indicators of what questions should I
Yeah,
ask now.
I just hear my social worker and my nurse having a heart attack right now about HIPAA laws and things. But I think that before orientation starts, if we know sort of what division people are in and things like that, and we have their direct supervisors reach out to them individually and ask this very simple question, like, how can I best support you? Like through orientation, through, you know, like that kind of sort of just transparency, authenticity kind of thing. Maybe they would say something.
Sure.
I think too, a lot of camps have struggled soliciting that information from caregivers because they've thought that if I tell you about my child's thing that they have, then they're going to be treated differently. And I think we as an industry have gotten a lot better in framing the question as like, we are asking this because we can provide accommodations if you let us know, or we can do this differently. And so when we frame it to staff, it's like, hey, we don't have to say the we're not thing. Just go straight into we're asking because staff training is a learning environment, and we want to make sure we accommodate all learning styles. What learning tools could we use to help you learn best? Letting them know why it matters, I think, is a huge thing. And like you said, giving multiple points of entry to really disclose that is huge.
Yeah, we have the same thing with those restrictions about what we're actually allowed to ask and mandate from staff in terms of what information we gather from them. And so I think the phrasing is super important, and just talking about giving options. Like, you can make a Google form for hired staff and really say, would you rather this situation of learning, this situation, or this situation, and actually describe what that would be. Would you rather pick which sessions you would go to? Do you want to sit and listen? Do you want to be active while you're learning? And so that can help us get a little bit more information. I think the other piece is training our trainers and the people that are delivering the training to be really observant about what's going on. And so last year we played around with how our staff training was delivered, and we tried a lot of different things to cater to different types of learners, because there's beauty in that and how diverse that is, and how open people are about how they learn, and they're leaning into how they're learning a little bit more. So we'd set up different kinds of sessions, and we challenged our senior staff to pay attention to how people were responding to things. So that was kind of like a case study we did last year. And yeah, your schedule is set in stone, but to really train your staff to be a little bit more flexible of like, okay, I can pick up that these people are getting a little antsy while they're sitting on the ground listening. How can I switch this up? And really training our trainers, which are our senior staff in our setting that lead some of that training, to kind of go with the flow and change it up as needed based on the feedback they're receiving.
Yeah, I don't think if I was given a session, I would have a hard time seeing that. Like, to me, you need other people watching it besides the person actually giving it. But I'm just curious, you said you changed up a lot of the things that you did to sort of help this out, Jordanna. Can you be more specific in some of the things?
Yeah, we did a lot of more like mixed groupings of staff, so people weren't with the same people all the time, which provided some different opportunities. Some people feel a lot safer with that group that they came with. A lot of our staff didn't come with anybody, and so it gave them an opportunity to meet with different people, maybe that they're not working with all the time. But we really challenged our team to not do those sit and get sessions where they're just sitting in a room listening. It was all hands on. We were training our team to say, if you're at the front of the room, you are at the front of the room for, let's say, max 15 minutes, and then we're moving, right? And how to incorporate those things. We also gave our frontline leaders lesson plans almost to follow. And that was really helpful because it gave them a guide, because we forget even our senior staff all learn differently too, and they might need that guidance. So we would create lesson plans for our senior staff to lead these sessions that said, here's the template for it. If you're stuck, use this. If you want to add your own flair, go for it. And so it gave those options even at that senior supervisory level, which was kind of cool.
And Jordan, I love what you said about watching the room and like realizing when you needed to pivot. And I hear what Andy's saying about like, oh, that's a lot when I'm at the front of the room. But if other people are looking for you, I think a really good tool to have or to give your staff is like a 1-pager sheet of paper that's like debrief techniques, and it just has like a 1-word, 2-word, whatever phrase to remind people of that, or like quick visuals you can use. So MJ, our podcast producer, like recently put together like a whole template, like a whole idea of different visuals that you can use while you're facilitating. Those are free on our website too. But I like that they're grouped into things we can do ahead of time and things that we can change in the moment if we notice that this group needs it, like kind of more reactive measures as well. And like you said, we're not going to think about those or be able to pivot on a dime. Probably we like need some reminders. So yeah, just like a 1-pager that your staff can look at and move a little bit quicker to get to, I think is super helpful.
And I
No,
think going at it with teams too, like it doesn't have to be just one person who's leading the session, right? Like if that's hard for you to do your session and pick up on what's in the room, maybe have some things in place to do check-ins. I do them at camp. I also do them I run conversation clubs for kids, and I do them in there too, of like how to check in with yourself, right? That self-awareness piece of how's everyone doing? It can be a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in between, so you can get a sense of the room. Like, do we have to move, right? Checking in on if we need some more movement breaks. Because I think what's most challenging for all of us, to be honest, especially in the last couple of years, is that like regulation piece. Like, how do we stay calm, right? And like, we can't expect our campers to stay calm if we ourselves can't stay calm in those moments, right? And so training staff to develop their own regulation strategies will not only help them, whether it's at training or in a day where they're getting stressed, because we know the pace of day camp, like it's crazy. And so there's bound to be moments of dysregulation, but kids pick up on that when we're dysregulated. So if our staff are dysregulated, the kids will get dysregulated. When the kids are dysregulated, the staff will get dysregulated. So it's this idea, this new term I've used that I was talking to Sam about, this idea of like co-regulation, of like, how can you calm yourself down so other people will feel calm, kind of thing.
And feeding off that, back in the day, my directors would take, if I was running a training session, they would take that as, I can go do my other shit right now, and I don't need to be here. But number one, they're modeling what they want their staff to be doing, so they've got to be involved. And number two, they've got to be helping not only with their own regulation with everyone else's. They need to be seeing these cues from the beginning, picking out that person that's brought out their cell phone and is at the back of the room with nobody. How do you get them involved? How do you transition? And the 5-minute warnings before transitions, for adults, for some reason, that's one that's huge for me and for my staff. Is we tend to not tell them that we're switching subjects or that we're moving to this other thing until it's time to move. And by then everybody's like, you gotta give me some warning.
Yeah, you need your Michael Brandwein techniques with the staff as well as the kids, right?
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
But
Yeah, I mean,
I'd love to talk more about the regulation a little bit, though. That's a great subject.
yeah. Well, we're going to take a little break. But in regard to regulation, something, because we give, that's a major part of our orientation every single year, certainly ever since 2020. And And, one of the questions they always say is like, what do you do normally, to regulate, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, oh, I put my earbuds in and listen to music. Oh, I get my favorite snack and all these kind of things. And it's like, literally, nope, 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 it's not such a great thing. But before we get to talk more about regulation, I just want to say, we're talking about orientation. At the CODA conference, I did a morning like roundtable director thing with Roger Christian, who's a resident camp director at Laurel South. He's an awesome guy, Svengali of types, and he started the thing because the whole thing was about how to get staff to sort of buy into what you're doing and feel comfortable and all that kind of thing. And he told like a 10-minute story about one of his first camp jobs when he was like in college. I mean, he even may have been a young teacher at that point, and he went off to the sleepaway camp in a state that he had never been to and all. And how the whole first day, like nobody talked to him. Nobody like took the time and all the people who had been there were all hugging each other and all that kind of thing. And he said that to this day, he has never felt more alone than he felt at the first day of working at a camp. I mean, how awful that is, right? And the stress and the anxiety that just creates, unintentionally on a regular neuropic. I mean, Roger Christian is about as cool gets. And for him to say that, that really made a mark on me and made me like want to focus so much about that. And it's so hard because we're trying to break like basically human behavior, which is that people want to see their old friends and they want to talk to their old friends. And it's like, no, don't talk to your friends, talk to these new people. And it's such a hard thing. All right, but before we go on, I have to give a shout out to AM Skyer because they help pay for this podcast to get produced and everything. They're one of our sponsors. They've been one of our sponsors since the beginning. They are the leading insurance and strategic partner for many of the finest camps in America. AM Skyer partners with camps to provide public relations, legal, medical, behavioral support, and more. Experience the AM Skyer difference and learn more at amskyer.com. And they do actually have a lot of people on their staff who are social workers and such. And, so one of these people actually works for me at my camp. And she many times, unfortunately, in the last 17 years, has been like, hey, listen, I can't be here the next 2 days because I'm going off to Pennsylvania because they had a situation at this camp and I have to go. And they send their little SWAT team over there and help, deal with the repercussions and the emotional stuff of these tough situations that are inevitable at a camp over the course of time. So they have this group of people, whether it's their public relations people that could help write the emails or their lawyers when it gets into the sticky stuff. Honestly, they save me thousands of dollars every single year for me not having to outsource that to a third party. So, they really are partners, and that's what they call these people that actually go out there. So check them out. Check out the AM Skyer difference. It's amskyer.com. 100 years, folks. 100 years. We're on year 102 with AM Skyer. All right. So going back to co-regulation, Sam, you want to?
Okay, so a lot of us that have been doing inclusion with kids have an area that when they know they're escalating, they can go down and cool out. They've got their whatever special things that help them regulate in their corners and whatever. But I had not done that for staff. And I am going to try and do that this year, which it's harder to do staff breaks and let them know there's someplace they can go when they feel like they're losing it. So, but I wanted to hear more about co-regulation and kind of a definition and ways to make that work other than just a spot they could go to. So
First of all, Jordanna, I think you should trademark it. I think it's awesome. I think people are going to be using this a
I
lot.
definitely can't take credit. I think I will get in big trouble if I say my word. But a lot of people kind of in the rehab world, whether they're speech therapists or occupational therapists, are very familiar with this term. And I love to share it because I think people don't realize how much it applies to camp. Like we are overstimulated constantly in a camp setting. Like just if you're an outdoor camp, there's so much going on that grabs your attention. There's all these things. And there's so much input coming into our systems all the time, and we're expected to manage all of that. And so in day camps, we start really young. I was listening to your other podcast where some camps start as young as like 2. And there's developmental norms of kind of when regulation comes to be and is fully formed. But adults have challenges regulating as well. Teenagers definitely have challenge regulating. And we just have to be mindful and I think eyes wide open to all of that. Because I like to think of it a little bit as a ladder, right? If you're getting too much input, it's like a seesaw, right? You can't balance that seesaw if you're dysregulated. So you're kind of off kiltered a little bit. And so some people need more sensory input to calm down and regulate, and some people need less. It really depends on the person. And that is kind of the hallmark of inclusion, I find as well, because you meet one person with special needs, you really meet one person with special needs. Everyone has a unique profile and everyone's needs are different. And so kind of figuring out and working with the individual, whether they're a camper or a staff, to figure out what their sensory profile is, or really what fills their bucket and helps them feel calm and all of those different things. You want to achieve that balance of the seesaw because that's when you can enter this, they call it like this zone of learning, right? Optimal learning. And that's a little bit sciencey, but let's be real, a day in camp, we're learning all the time. We ask our little ones to learn by like how to gain independence and putting on their shoes by themselves. You're learning how to stay with the group. People from our campers to our staff are learning how to maintain social interactions. Like our social batteries get really drained at camp where you're on all the time, right? And that can all impact our regulation. And we need to be in that state of learning even for a day of camp, right? It's not true that you're just coming to camp to have fun. We're doing a lot of learning and it takes a lot of work for a lot of different people. And so to get to that zone of learning, you have to figure out how to stay calm and stay as regulated as possible, or when you get dysregulated, how to come back. The challenge is that it's really hard to come back to that zone and that level on your own. And so that's the co part, because co means that it requires other people. So some people can self-regulate. And when I was working in kindergarten classes, self-regulation was like a buzzword. It was like, how can this kid self-regulate? I know Allison has a little one, like he can't do that on his own, right?
Not
And
even
so
close.
not even close. And we wouldn't expect him to do that on his own, but we come to camp and we have so many kids and we're like, okay, everyone just go along with the schedule and do your thing. They need someone else to help them. And so I don't think that just applies to campers. So we know that you rub someone on the back and you calm them down. And sometimes that works for some people. That's co-regulation, right? Talking in a calmer voice, bringing your volume down, right? So there's co-regulation. You can also co-escalate someone, right? So if, when someone tells you, hey, relax, it's fine, it's fine. Like you can say the word relax, but that's really going to escalate me. So you are contributing to me getting higher on my escalation scale. But if you
Nothing's
sit
worse than calm down. You just
nothing
want to hit
works.
them.
Yeah. And so you can have, like, I think we have to empower the people working with our people in our community and let them know that they have the power to kind of change that for better or for worse, right? And so the idea of co-regulation is that you have an impact on how you can help somebody regulate, and we all need help with that. So I hope that explanation made sense.
The one other thing about that is some kids just need someone to just sit beside them, not looking at them, just there until they're ready to talk. And that's a really hard skill for counselors to learn because they want to fix, I want to get this over with so I can get back in the game. So you do need those staff as well that can just be present and wait until they're ready without revving them back up.
Yeah. And like behavior is communication. And this is my speech pathologist plug too, of like, they're trying to tell us something by behaving that way, right? And so, but also if we're using too much language when they're really escalated, that's gonna not help them regulate either. And so trying to figure out what that toolbox is for our campers, but also for our staff. And I think for us at Robin Hood, like you're asking about tangible things we can do, it also has to do with like organizational structure and changes. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. Like there's lots of information about visuals and other things like that that people can use, but to have the people power to support staff is maybe the most important thing you can do. And I know at Robinhood in recent years, especially since 2020, like you're saying, Andy, like we changed our org structure to make sure that our unit heads were on the ground. They weren't the ones on the phone. They were the ones supporting not just the campers, but especially the staff in supporting the campers, because we found that it was just, yeah, coming back from the pandemic and those years, like the staff were really struggling and needed someone there to help them regulate and get through their days.
Yeah, and for places like Robin Hood and Liberty Lake that charge a pretty penny for their kids to come, and we can hire these folks because we know that it's important, right? That's one thing. I am more concerned with the nonprofit camps and the municipal programs like SAM, who are running on shoestring budgets and are already like stretched, like, and it is a priority. It is a priority. It's like, yes, and that's nice. And maybe find someone that has these skills to be a unit leader or something like that. Like, I'm fortunate to have someone that just does that. I'm actually hiring 2 people this year. They're like a guidance counselor and a social worker that are just supporting staff and kids. But most places don't have that luxury to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm used to working with those shoestring budget camps, but my head is still swimming with ideas from all the things that George said, because I think there's, when we are hearing from people lately, if the summer camp signing is comes up, that people don't know how to talk to each other, like coworkers don't know how to communicate. So making sure that we have a staff training session on communicating with each other and building co-regulation into that, and really intentionally building your team, I think is so important. And also recognizing that your co-regulator may not be at camp with you, and what opportunities are there to reach out to that person while they're at camp, while you're there at camp. And I know we can't be on our phones in front of kids, and maybe that means like there's a 10-15 minute break, but I saw something recently about like 8-minute friends, and it's that friend that, if you feel like you are about to burst, that's the person you want to text and be like, do you have 8 minutes? And there's some science behind it. It only takes like 8 minutes to calm people down. I'm sure for some people that's more or less, but what opportunities do we have for people to think about during staff training who their support network outside of camp is, and give them opportunities to connect with those people, definitely out after camp, which still feels hard because they're tired and stuff. But what are there opportunities during the day for them to check in with that outside support system?
Yeah, if you said that to me at my camp, Allison, I'd say, you know what? You need a break. Just tell me you need a break. Go into the office, grab your phone, call whoever you gotta do, look at whatever you gotta look at, and do whatever. Like we're not running a prison here, but we do have that availability. By the way, like the stuff that Jordanna and Allison, the stuff you guys are saying is just amazing. I'm so glad that I have my AI is going to transcribe it for me too. So, but the thing about the co-regulation thing, right, that I struggle with, and I'm assuming others do as well. So you have this person that's losing their shit, let's say, okay, and is having trouble co-regulating at this point, right? And this is not a little kid that I'm going to sit next to and wait. Okay, this is somebody that I'm going to sort of get them off the ledge, but I really can't talk to them about this at this point because they're just too revved up. Right. And then we're running these crazy day camps and it's like 90 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour. And then all of a sudden it's over and then this person goes home. Right. And it's like, I have trouble finding the times to sort of debrief these things with them. And then I debrief it, let's the next day, or maybe I even forget and it's 2 days later. Right. And they sort of forget what it was like. Right. So I sort of struggle with like, this moment is happening, and I do not have the skills that you guys honestly have. The way you guys just talk, that's not how I talk. So I sort of either I need to bring someone in or I need to talk to them when they're calm and they're at a normal level. And I feel like I miss opportunities, and then I'm debriefing on something that they don't even remember how crazy it was themselves.
Well, I think that follow-up though is so important, Andy, like you were saying, is once they're regulated again and can hear you and can sort through their feelings, you don't want to just ignore that it happened and just let it go, because you need to know for next time what they're going to need from you. If they can, process, okay, if I could have called my friend at home for 8 minutes, then I would have been okay. If you can find a way to help me through that. because too often we get busy and it does get missed and we don't debrief it, and then it happens again and
Yeah.
again
I
because we
mean, at a
didn't
day
prepare.
camp, I mean, I've had times I was just like, you know what, just go home. Just go home. Right? We're day camp. We can say that. You know, just go
Yeah,
home. Let's start fresh tomorrow. You know, kind of thing.
right.
Yeah, it's so real. Like we wear so many different hats too, that like to keep track of all of that, and as much as you care, to like show that you care in your actions and find the time for that can be really challenging. I think it's also the recovery part of moments like that is really hard. Like for someone to come back after having a moment like that is really hard for them, for the staff that they work with, for everything, right? And I've seen it in our setting a lot of times where like some people can come back and some people just choose not to because they've had a moment like that. And maybe it's us paying lip service. We're doing a lot of work about like how to frame mistakes at camp, right? Because a lot of people are afraid to make mistakes. And some people can see these moments as mistakes. They're not mistakes, they're part of natural life, but
Failures. They see it as failures. I've heard
right.
that. They use that word.
And they're really, and I say they, like all of our staff are so hard on themselves. And so, I mean, you and I can look at staff and say, hey, it's okay, all good, come on back, like we're great. They might not believe that, right? And it either might take them time or they're never going to believe that. So maybe, I don't know if this will work, but like maybe it's paying more lip service at the beginning or having plans of how do you recover from this, right? Here's what we're going to do. Here's what support looks like from us. Because the other challenge we're up against is support looks different to every single person, right? And we can't be that to everyone. And I think that's also an important disclaimer. Like we can talk about all these things, but there is a job to be done at camps. Let's be real. And we're hiring them to do a job. And if they can't do the job, then that's another conversation we have to have. And some of the language we often use is like, we're not a treatment facility either, right? And so if you're at a point where your needs are too great and you can't be safe and successful in this setting, then we need to have a conversation about that. So I think that's important to mention too.
Oh, that's such an important point, Jordanna. And the way that we frame it with our support team is that you're like the nurse. You're given Band-Aids and you're given ice packs and
Yeah.
you're doing triage, right? But in the end, this person was hired to do a job and you're not going to be their therapist for the rest of the summer. You know, they got to do that elsewhere, you know?
So Allison, do you have, I got my midsummer evaluation form from you. Do you have a pre-camp questionnaire with the questions like, what's your learning style? How do you regulate? Is there already a template out there, a resource that maybe we can use like at camp training so we can be proactive?
Yeah, we have a one that was built probably 3 or 4 years ago that does not ask about this, but I'm running camp this summer, and so I'm redoing a lot of our resources, and so definitely we'll add that to our form, and then we'll update the template form that we have. So have a resource there, and just also going back to thinking about the regulation, I'm thinking about this like an RPM meter or whatever that is on your car that goes up. And I think it's important to talk about staff that way too, because when we are going up and we're in this like area where it's the dysregulation is building, then we can take steps to regulate. That's when we can co-regulate. That's when we can have a list maybe that we've talked about during staff training of things that help us regulate. When we have maxed out and we have actually hit dysregulation, we can't, these like tactics that we're talking about, techniques, they don't work there, right? They work in the getting there part. So how are we teaching staff to identify that they're getting there and doing intervention during that getting there time instead of waiting until it happens? Because you're right, Annie, when it happens and it's really hard for them to come back to because we can't use the same techniques. And my sister's has her degree in school counseling, so she would say that we could ask them to journal about it, and then we could have the written documentation of what happened. Some people are going to think you were ridiculous if you approach them with a
Some are going to throw their journal at my head is what they'll end up
yeah.
doing.
I'm not journaling, but
Yeah, I
Right.
think the logging, just journaling is a great exercise for a lot of people, but it makes me think of like the logging piece of the events that happen. So, Andy, like you're saying, how it's really hard to follow up and keep track of those same people might come for an interview for the next year, and they might not bring it up. You might completely forget about it. And I think, I know my mom would be in my ear and saying it's really important to log those things as well, and to have a record of how it's going, because you don't need to bring it up right that second or even the day after, but you should find some opportunities to kind of debrief and talk through what worked, what didn't work,
Yeah.
what other things they could have used, and
Yeah.
how that sets them up for the future.
It's an Achilles heel of the day camp thing, is because you don't want to say anything right away because they're going to bite your head off, and then you don't want to wait too long and forget. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. I just got to pause because we have to say thank you to CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, because they too have been with us since the beginning and help get this done so that you can listen to these wonderful podcasts. This is turning into such a great podcast. I'm really, really glad we came up with this topic, Sam. Thank you so much. So CRS, they are your go-to source for recreation solutions that will help ensure that your camp thrives. Explore their website today at crs4rec.com. They came in this past week at my camp and put in their alert system. We don't have a PA system in our camp. A lot of camps don't. We have walkie-talkies and such, and it's not very good when we're doing lost camper drills and such. So we have this alert system that gets triggered off in my office, and it gets blasted on these horns. There's like 3 or 4 different sounds, plus there's like a comeback. It's all good sound. Yeah, and we're really appreciative that we have it. We got it because I know Pierce Day Camp out in Long Island got it, and then a whole bunch of other have got it. So check it out at crs4rec.com. CRS is serious about fun. That's what I wanted to say. All right, guys. What else do we
There's-
need to hit, Sam? What's on
There's
your
so
list?
much to unpack here,
I
but
know.
I was wondering if so one of the first camps I worked at, it was actually my husband was a counselor at this camp, and somehow I ended up working for free a lot of special events and nights and things.
Somehow you ended up married to your husband too.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, because he was a good counselor, so that was the ticket.
That's
But
hot. I know. I get it.
yeah, my his director was like the best for taking the whole camp staff out for events and stuff. So he took us all to Kings Island, and we had a staff member with cerebral palsy, and she was fine. She could do everything, but if you got her laughing, she would fall. And so the assistant director was a hilarious guy to begin with. But as soon as she started to laugh, he'd go, no, 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 no. And then of course she'd laugh even harder. And then when she fell, we all did push-ups. So until she could get back up again. So we were in the middle of Kings Island at the big Eiffel Tower, and that happened. And we're all doing, like 20 of us doing push-ups at the Eiffel Tower in Kings Island. So that was my first staff with a physical different need. And since then, I've got other stories, but I won't go into them. But have you guys worked with staff that have obvious different needs that are physical?
Well, every year we ended up with a good half dozen of them wearing walking boots because they sprain their ankle at some point during the summer, or they hurt their knee or something like that. But being that we have the same sort of mission and goals and outlook as Jordanna does at Camp Robin Hood, we tried to make it work on all these different levels. And for us, it's like a great thing if we can make it work, because then the kids see it and everybody sees it, and it just sort of reinforces our mission of what we do and makes everybody feel good about what we do. I mean, what we have found at Liberty Lake is that having these, whether it's kids or staff with additional needs, a lot of people would think, oh, it's going to put a burden on people. It's going to compromise the experience of the others and all this kind of thing. And it's just completely the opposite. It enhances the experience of the others. And when the end of the summer comes and I get these like thank you emails and such, I get more from the, let's say, neurotypical and physically typical people talking about the parents talking about the great experience that their kids had with the folks that, were a little bit different than they have. I get just as many from them than I do from the kids of the special needs kids, the parents of special needs kids. So people do get a lot out of it. And I think that if you look at it that way and you frame it that way, it's such a great thing.
Yeah, we've had over the years a lot of staff with additional needs as well, many of whom went through camp as campers and then continued on as staff. And so it's really nice, and they've been such great members of our staff team, and they contribute in different ways. And sometimes it's finding spots in camp that play to their strengths and to their skill sets. So we have one staff member who's been with us for so many years, and he takes such pride in organizing. We provide towels at camp, and he organizes all of our towels, gets them to all of the campers, all of that. And he is so well known across our entire camp, and is so loving, and all of our campers and staff love seeing him and greeting him, and he does the same to everyone else. And because he's been here for so long, even like our alumni have gotten to know him as well. But I think it is important as we hire staff with additional needs to look at their skill sets too, right? And so to see what their strengths are and how we can play to their strengths. Sometimes that comes down to writing some differentiated and different job descriptions, right? So if we have a staff member who has perhaps some like executive functioning, organizational learning challenges, and it's hard for them to think ahead, plan activities, execute certain things. Maybe it's that they are organizing equipment, right? And that's really their main task. Yes, they'll participate in other things that all staff do, but having a to-do list and a checklist of doing those kinds of things might be really great for them. Maybe it's we also have had people with some physical disabilities. And so it's like, what location of camp is going to optimize your success as a staff member too, right? And we're a large camp that's all outdoors, and our terrain is pretty rocky, and it's challenging to navigate if you're in a wheelchair. But playing to their strengths and what they want to do throughout the summer, but also what works for our environment.
Yeah, I have one of those ones going on right now. I have to figure out for the summer, a sports specialist who can't really move around that much. I just want to talk about the thing about your former campers with needs who have grown up and now can become staff. And some of them are lower functioning, others, some of them have executive functioning issues, some fine motor skill issues, all that kind of stuff. There are so many jobs around camp that need to get done. There are so many little jobs. You talked about folding towels. I don't have towels, but I mean, I don't have my own towels, but we have lost and found. And we have, at boating, we have a lake right behind me here, see, with the life vests, and we have mini golf and the clubs and the balls. Like, so we have started an intern program for these kids that once they sort of outgrow age-wise of camp, and they can't necessarily jump into a regular counselor job, right? They don't have the capabilities to do that. We create this job of one of these hidden things that people hate doing and needs to get done kind of things. And we have a person that is like their job coach that checks on them in on them throughout the day and has the sort of skills to do that. And we started the first year as a sheer internship, and there's no pay. But if they end up doing well with it, we bring them back to next year, then we start paying them and paying them more and that kind of thing. And I hope to have people like you talked about, Jordanna, with that person that's been there for years, because they really love it. They get a lot of love out of it, and they feel real valued, which I don't know if they get that feeling in their regular life at school, so I think that it's doing a lot of good.
And I think it's something we need to like check ourselves about too. Listen to y'all talk about it, and I'm thinking about my own experiences. When a camper has grown up for a long time, and maybe they've been a leader in training for us, and then a counselor in training for us, they've been with us, and they're still not great at talking to kids. That's just like not their strong suit, but they're really good at planning activities. And this is just like a neurotypical one of our all people who's been with us forever. I don't think twice about it, right? Like I job craft a way for them to still be on staff. And it's really not that different when we're talking about staff with special needs. It's just we have to get out of our own head about it because it's something we're doing all the time to make camp happen. So we just gotta, I think it's a mental block for a lot of us.
I had a guy that worked for me after camp for that couple hours at the end of the day, who was in a wheelchair. He would blow and do it to move it, but he came with his own nurse. So that roadblock of how do I take care of him? I don't have to. He's coming with his nurse, who's also kind of a job coach. Like you said, he had strengths that were incredible. So we would put the snack bin on his lap so the kids would come up to get their snack and greet him. And he was so smart. He became a doctor, but he would, that way he'd interact with every child every day. And then he started teaching them how to play chess. And so many kids learned how to play chess from him. But at first it was scary because he looked so different. And, the kids, that's why we had to find a way to get the kids near him to break that barrier of, oh, you look different, to, oh, it's just JJ. So, anyway, it was definitely rewarding.
Yeah. What you said, Allison, about people having these roadblocks in their head. I mean, Sam and I have been around for a while now. I am just optimistic that, people Jordanna's age who grew up, at least in the States, I can speak for, in inclusion classrooms. And it's just become much more normalized than Sam and I, where these kids were sort of just like hidden away. I have a lot of hope for the future that that people are just going to be integrated a lot more, and it's just going to be a lot more, you know, equity in this kind of thing. I really do.
I definitely agree with that. I remember when I was a new camp director, I started probably, I think 10 years ago, about 10 years now, listening to Camp Code and Camp Hacker for the first time. And they talked about writing things down and having signage. And that was like, whoa, to me. And now it's something that so many of us do, just second nature. It's just changed and become a lot easier, like you said.
And I think that idea of inclusion maybe before sounded like such a big feat, right? And it's like, how can I do that? Or like, my camp doesn't have an inclusion program. Truth be told, every camp has an inclusion program and you're already doing it. So I would say, like, almost do an audit, like, look back and like, what are those practices that we're already doing to include staff and campers? Because you're guaranteed to be doing a couple things, and then you can just pick a few to like level up and choose a small thing to do to really like take that to the next level. But I think people should really think back and kind of pat themselves on the back for the job they're doing, because camps are doing a lot of inclusion even when they don't know about it. Because inclusion, even at Robin Hood, it used to be if you had a certain diagnosis or if you were in a certain classroom, if you had this kind of support, and then it would trigger us to kind of do a certain level of intake and get you an additional staff and all of that. That's not what it is anymore, because so many people have these needs that are just different ways of learning and how they go about the world and how they interact with things and with people. And so that inclusion part is more widespread and it's not as specific.
Yeah, it's so true. It's a big deal and we have to get over this hump. And like you said, everybody's doing it to a degree. So what I always end up saying about this kind of thing, it's a matter of the intentionality of it, right? Because we as a camp at Liberty Lake went from being good at it, proficient. I'll say we were proficient at it because we were new and we needed campers and we were like the Statue of Liberty and we were just like, please send us your anybody and we'll make it work, And then when it hit a point where we're like, wow, we got a lot of these kids, we have to, then we brought in special ed teachers and we put in, just strategies and actual, things in there to make sure that, intakes like you were talking about, we're very big on that too. Now we're doing it intentionally and we know that we're doing it well and we can handle it better. And our regular frontline staff feel more supported because of that too. And our regular frontline staff all know, because we say it during orientation, we're all part of the inclusion team, folks. There is no inclusion team where it's the regular staff. It's everybody.
Yeah. Even in the interview process, it's like you're going to be involved in this if you're going to work here. Now, at Women in Camp Conference, Allison and Jordanna did a great session, and it relates to inclusion by gender discrimination. But they're both very successful women in the business, and they had brought up this one question that I thought was a very interesting question. Do one of you want to talk about how you separated the room?
Yeah, so Allison and I, it was a long time ago. We're just talking, just there's memory. It was so fun to be there and to speak and do it together, which was really nice. And so I think Allison and I asked the question of whether you want a seat at the table. So Allison, maybe you can talk more.
Yeah, just from conversations with people, this is a very simplified way that I think about it. I think that when we need to advocate for something or we want something changed, there are people who have the mentality that I want a seat at the table to do that, which means like I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get brought in on those conversations and those decisions and be the advocate for myself and the other people that fall into whatever I'm advocating for. And there are some people who believe that we can change the things by like not taking part in whatever activities going on at the table. So maybe that looks like boycotting, or maybe it looks like trying to start our own group, or maybe it looks like something. It just basically says the table is not for me, or maybe you think you're never going to get a seat at the table, and some people aren't. But that's the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum is I'm not going and advocating and waiting my turn. I'm over here taking another way about it.
And I was always told if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So anyway,
And
so
some people like I think still like might think that way too, and it's different for every person. And I think it relates so much to this conversation because sometimes, and maybe historically, like we make a lot of assumptions of how people learn or how we want them to learn, especially as it relates to staff training, which is what we started on of like, this is what staff training is looking like, right? For everybody. And I think giving people a voice, and I mean, we talked about it in terms of like women navigating the workplace and working with different people, but it applies to our different learners and our staff that are coming into our settings because let's give them some more choice and see where that leads us because we could learn so much from them and they can learn so much about themselves and it can all happen at the same time.
Yeah,
that's
when we're
wonderful.
talking about it in that capacity, we talked some about the idea of like who has like pulled a chair up for us and who, once we get there, can we pull a chair up for? And that fits perfectly into this conversation.
Yeah. Well, I love the growth mindset aspect of it. We can always learn from others. And that's was my point, I think, about the parents thanking me for their kids being around others with additional needs because it helped their kids grow. And I know it helps me grow as a leader, seeing it, and I learn from it. Like you said earlier, every kid's different, every situation's different. You know.
Every time I talk to you guys, I learn more. So I have notes that I'll be working on when I leave here.
Well, Sam and I were saying that our best compliment we got at Tri-State was somebody that came up to us and said, I listen to the Day Camp podcast, when I drive to work and back and forth, and every day is Tri-State when we listen. So I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
So give that lady a shout out, Sam. You had her name.
Oh,
It was the idea.
I thought it was Jennifer Pelletier who gave us the suggestion. And the reason I want to shout her out is because if you guys in the audience have subjects that you want us to talk about that we haven't brought up, please let them know. Where do they do that at the bottom, Andy, so that we can
Oh
get more
Lord, I
subjects
don't
out there
know.
for
You
you?
know what? Just go to the show notes. It's got Sam's contact info, my contact info. I don't know. There's a general
Absolutely.
catch-all. I
But
couldn't
let
even
us
tell you.
know if there's, some subjects that we're totally missing that you would really love to hear about, and we'll pull in some experts on it.
And we will blab about it for an hour, ladies and
Yeah,
gentlemen. So we want to thank the Go Camp Pro team and Camptivities and AM Skyer and Commercial Recreation Specialists for allowing us to bring this podcast to you. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the Day Camp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. Check out our show notes for all our episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact info for the show, for Allison Krabill, for Jordanna Grossinger, and for me and my co-host Sam. So thanks for listening and making yourself a better Day Camp Pro. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Day Camp Pod.